All right, let's dive right into this explainer on the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. Have you ever actually thought about how nearly 200 different countries with totally different laws, cultures, and political systems manage to talk to each other without constantly arresting each other's representatives? Well, the answer is this exact document. It is the ultimate rulebook keeping the global diplomatic system functioning. Today, we're going to build a complete, detailed mental map of this treaty together. By the end of this, you'll be able to easily memorize its key articles, know exactly what their tasks are, and completely understand their real-world implications. To make memorizing all this a breeze, we're going to chunk this out into 6 clear parts. First, setting up the mission. Second, diplomatic ranks. Third, protecting the embassy fortress. Fourth, the invincible diplomat. Fifth, duties and breaking ties. And finally, ratifications and dispute resolution.
Okay, bucket number 1, setting up the mission, which covers Articles 1 through 12. To memorize how diplomacy officially kicks off, just think of this as your diplomatic starter pack. Article 1 sets up your vocabulary. It strictly defines whether you're a diplomatic agent or a head of mission. Then, Article 3 hands you your exact job description. Your task is to represent, negotiate, and report on conditions back home. But Article 4 is the big one. It's the gatekeeper known as agreement. This simply means the host country must explicitly consent to you leading the mission before you even pack your bags. And get this, they don't even have to give a reason if they say no.
Now, where it gets really wild is the notorious persona non grata rule found in Article 9. Think of this as the host country's ultimate eject button. If a diplomat crosses a line, or honestly, if geopolitical tensions just run a bit too high, the receiving state can declare them persona non grata at absolutely any time without ever explaining why. The sending state is then legally obligated to either recall that person or terminate their functions immediately. It's a swift, unappealable mechanism for setting hard boundaries.
Moving right along to Section 2. Diplomatic ranks and hierarchy, covering Articles 13 through 19.
In diplomacy, hierarchy is established down to the exact minute. Article 13 dictates precisely when a head of mission officially starts their job. It's time-stamped to the exact date and time they present their formal credentials to the host's foreign ministry. This strict time-stamping completely prevents any awkward confusion over who has precedence. And what if the head of the mission leaves suddenly? Well, Article 19 ensures there is zero power vacuum by establishing the role of the chargé d'affaires ad interim, basically a temporary acting head who steps up immediately to keep the lights on.
You've definitely got to memorize this one for Article 14. There are exactly 3 classes of heads of mission. The top tier, that's your ambassadors and nuncios, who are accredited directly to heads of state. The second tier includes envoys and ministers, also accredited to heads of state, and the third tier consists of chargés d'affaires, who are only accredited to ministers for foreign affairs. The coolest part about the treaty here is that it's incredibly clear. Except for basic etiquette and, who sits where at fancy state dinners, there is absolutely no legal difference between these heads of mission based on their class.
All right, on to our third bucket, protecting the embassy fortress. This covers Articles 20 to 28.
Think of an embassy as a literal fortress. To easily memorize these protections, just lock in these 3 pillars: 22, 24, and 27. Article 22 protects the physical walls, making the premises inviolable. Article 24 goes a step farther, making all archives and documents completely untouchable at any time, no matter where they are. And Article 27 protects communication. It states that the legendary diplomatic bag, which, by the way, could be a small envelope or a massive shipping crate, shall never be opened or detained by the host country. That rule for the physical building, it is absolute. The premises of the mission shall be inviolable, period. Whether it's local police, firefighters, or the military, absolutely no one from the receiving state can step foot inside without the explicit consent of the head of the mission. The host country actually bears a massive special duty to protect the premises against any intrusion or damage from outside mobs or protesters. They essentially have to treat the embassy as completely untouchable soil. Now let's step outside the building for Section 4, the invincible diplomat, Articles 29 through 39. To really lock this code into your brain, you have to separate the real estate from the human being. While Article 22 shields the physical embassy building from search and seizure, Article 31 casts a powerful invisible legal shield over the actual person. Under Article 31, a diplomatic agent enjoys total immunity from the criminal jurisdiction of the receiving state. They literally cannot be arrested or detained. They also get massive immunity from civil and administrative jurisdiction, and they are never, ever obliged to give evidence as a witness.
Here is the exact sequence of personal protections you need to know to understand just how far this goes. Article 31 is that immense legal shield. But Article 32 acts as the safety valve. It means the sending state, the home government, can choose to explicitly waive that immunity. Then, looking at financial perks, Article 34 ensures diplomats are largely exempt from personal or regional taxes. And here's the crucial one. Article 37 extends these exact same formidable protections to the diplomats' family members living in their household as long as they aren't nationals of the host state.
But hold on, it's not a total free-for-all. If we're talking about high-stakes scenarios where a diplomat might actually face a lawsuit, you absolutely must remember these 3 specific exceptions to civil immunity under Article 31. The shield drops if a lawsuit involves their own private real estate in the host country, if they are wrapped up in private inheritance or succession cases, or, and this is a big one, if they are running a side hustle. If a diplomat engages in any professional or commercial activity outside their official functions for personal profit, they are completely legally exposed for those specific activities.
Which brings us to Section 5, Duties and Breaking Ties, found in Articles 40 to 47. So what happens when it all hits the fan? Let's look at the endgame protocols. Under Article 44, even in the event of an outright armed conflict, the host state is legally obligated to let diplomats and their families leave immediately, and they even have to provide the transport. And check out Article 45. Even if diplomatic relations completely collapse into war, the host country must still legally respect and protect the empty embassy's property and archives. The sending state can even hand the keys to a neutral third country to watch over the physical building. Now, this is a massive balancing act. Sure, diplomats are virtually invincible when it comes to prosecution, but Article 41 explicitly states they can't just treat the host country like a lawless playground. They have a fundamental legal duty to respect local laws and regulations. Plus, they have a strict obligation not to interfere in the internal affairs of that state. It's the necessary legal and moral counterweight to all those absolute immunities we talked about in Article 31.
Finally, our last bucket. Section 6, Ratifications and Dispute Resolution, Articles 48 through 53.
To finish out our mental map, Articles 48 through 51 just outline the basic mechanics of how the treaty was signed and ratified through the UN Secretary General. But you really want to pay attention to the optional protocols. Protocol 1 ensures that members of a mission and their families don't accidentally acquire the nationality of the host state just because they live or had a kid there. And Protocol 2? That's all about what happens when 2 states fundamentally disagree on how to interpret this very convention. If 2 countries actually butt heads over interpreting this treaty, Optional Protocol 2 lays out a strict pipeline to resolve it. First, one party formally notifies the other that a dispute exists. Then, they enter a 2-month window where they can agree to just use an arbitral tribunal instead of going to court. But if that 2-month window expires and they can't agree, either party has the absolute right to escalate the issue and bring it straight to the compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And there you have it. We've just completely mapped out the most critical articles of the 1961 Vienna Convention. From that initial host consent in Article 4 to the untouchable fortress in Article 22 and the invincible diplomat in Article 31. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the thought. In a world that is vastly more interconnected and technologically advanced than it was in 1961, do you think the sweeping, absolute protections of Article 31 still strike the right balance between necessary diplomatic freedom and basic accountability? Or is it time for a major geopolitical update? Definitely keep that in mind as you watch global headlines unfold. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.